So Len, I'm going to turn it over to you. This is just announced to most people who know this program, but it's Leaders Connect. And I want to thank Raymond and Office Evolution, Zingerman's, and the Bank of Ann Arbor, who are all our sponsors and make this possible. And hopefully we're going to get back to the Roadhouse. I've had a couple of dinners out there on their patio, so they're still putting out great food and great service, but I don't know when it's going to be that we all gather together 100 of people into a room. That's going to be a little bit of time off in the future, I think. But I'm really happy to keep things going here on Zoom. And I do want to do one little self-promotion, mention that my website has been totally redesigned, and Annie Woloch is online. Annie is a great web designer, and she has taken a crack at trying to get all my material into one place, and I think she's done a great job. So I would encourage people to take a look at that, and if you have any feedback for me, please pass that on. So Len, are you ready to talk about this disruption and change and the opportunities for us all to look at the situation as an opportunity for us to grow and develop our business?
Sure, and just thank you everybody for coming this morning. It's nice to see a lot of old friends as well on the screen. And also a little shout out to Rob too. So he was a little modest this morning, but he always sees me in the hallway at the business school and he says, "Len, how's your pie chart?" And then I'll say, "Yeah," and he's like, no, it's not supposed to move outward. It's, so he always I think checks on me, which I always appreciate. And I've, for 30 years, this has been a terrific program that we've done, Rob, too, bringing people together in the community as well. And hey, folks, to make this, so I have a deck I'm going to post here in a second. But if you have questions, Rob and Emily are gonna filter through the questions for me too. And if there's a reaction thing, if I don't see it, there's a reaction button at the bottom with a hand up or something, or wave on the screen or something. Well, you won't be able to because I'm on the shared screen, but if you can hit the reaction button. So if you have a question on something, please, I'd like to make this interactive if possible, okay? So I'm gonna put my slides up. There we go. So I'll just move that over.
If I could remind everybody to mute their computer while we're listening so we don't get any background noise.
Okay. Well, just to start out, everybody knows this. There's this, the last 5 years, you're seeing tremendous change in business that's happening. And we're in this, what I'm calling this era of constant change now. At the university, we've started, and I started this years ago with Megan's help, looking at, voice over PowerPoint probably 10 years ago. And now, Megan, we're using it all the time in what we're teaching, and obviously teaching online. And it really the COVID really helped us kind of start seeing about new education ways to deliver our content. Yesterday, there was a message from the governor of California saying for autos there that by 2035, some of you probably saw this, that all cars in California will have to be electric. So just amazing amount of change that these industries are going to face, okay? And one of the things that changed, what I wanted to, when we teach business, we always talked about, looking at your direct competitors, what's happening in front of you, okay? And then that was probably 20 years ago. And then 10 years ago, we started saying, hey, you need to pay attention to the sides. What I wanted to talk to you too about this morning is what's coming behind you? What are you not seeing that can really alter the business? Especially if you're in one of these, and I could have put more on the left side, but if you're one of these industries on the left side, how is this going to change you? The AI systems today, when I was talking to Emily for a few minutes before we started this morning, I was in an innovation center in Asia last summer, and I took one of my professor friends to this innovation center, and it really freaked him out because this company could track their employees, like how many lines of code they wrote a day, whether the code was any good. It also tracked how long they went for a lunch break or bathroom break. It was amazing and scary at the same time. In fact, when we walked in, it was the only building I've ever gone into. You didn't have to show ID. They had facial recognized you in the street. And when we walked in, they introduced themselves. They knew who we were. And it was nice. We didn't have to have badges. But my point is the AI systems that are coming. We'll talk a little bit more about that. 3D printing, okay, the ability, and I'm glad Ray's on this morning too, but you're going to see being able to print things in your home, right? You need a car filter. Do you be able to, in 10 years, be able to print the car filter in your air cleaner for your car in your home? New energy systems are being developed. There's about 76 new companies now that are doing nuclear technology. I thought that was dead, and there's about 76 companies now that are looking at new ways to try to make nuclear safe. And comms, there's all kinds of ideas about communication, especially in the internet. And there's, everybody's talking about 5G. There's some companies that are looking at what is it going to take, what new systems to do 10G, 20G out there. Okay? So lots of change coming, but what I wanted to start you with is, how do you think it's not what you see. You guys all know who your competitors are. You know the people on the peripheral, but I think you got to start paying attention to what's behind you, because that can really alter your industry. And I wanted to show you a couple of examples coming up here too. So this is a project that I did a few years ago with a tire company, and I've masked it, but it's one of the 3 US companies. I've masked it. And we had a meeting with the senior leadership team. This is pre-COVID, talking about how there's going to be change. And we said to the senior leadership team, do you want the bad news or the worst news? And they stopped and they looked at us and said, wait a minute, isn't it supposed to be good news versus bad news? I said, no, it's worse than that. It's bad news and worse news. And with autonomous vehicles, the data shows that the tires will last 3 times longer. Okay? They won't need to be replaced as quickly. So if you're a $15 billion company, does that mean now you're a $10 billion company because you're not getting the replacement business? And one of the senior leaders said, well, Len, then wait a minute, what's the worst news? And I said, future cars may not ride on tires. And then you should have seen the room at that point. They all looked a little ill. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, cars might hover or they might ride on a rail, right? So there's new technologies, and they were all excited because they were showing this airless tire that they have is puncture proof. I said, that's all good, but there's technology coming that might take out the tire business. The other one, I wish Rich Sheridan was on this morning. I don't know if Rich is there, but there's a mortgage company in the heartland, and I changed the building up. So this is not their building, but it's a building like this, okay? There's 10,000 workers in this building that do 100% paper mortgages, okay? And the whole day we met with the CEO, and we're talking about trying to put some technology systems in, not even AI, just some basic technology to help some efficiencies, right? Reduce paper, because they have to spend millions of dollars a year just in paper, buying paper. And I just kept looking all day thinking, boy, if I had the right 3 to 4 programmers and a little social media budget, I don't want to put a lot of workers out of business either. That's not the point of the talk today. But boy, if you had the right people, I mean, you can really take down this business, okay? And now I just talked to them yesterday because I was doing this presentation. I asked, they have the workers show up in their car every day. They get a box of paper, and then they go back to their home, and then they go through the applications and so forth, and then they drive back and drop off the paper. It's obviously a completely inefficient system. So we were seeing these inefficiencies even before COVID. Okay? So today what Rob asked me to talk to you guys about, Rob and I have been talking this most over the summer, this topic, how to reinvigorate your business. So I want to talk a little bit about shifting your perspectives. How do you begin? How do you then find ideas and evaluate those ideas? And then I think something that and I'll talk more, we don't teach well even at the business school is how do you execute on those ideas? Okay? So shifting perspective. Some of you remember when we used to, when the big idea was, having centralized command and control systems in business. And then probably 20, 30 years ago, I started talking about having this multidisciplinary approach or the matrix organization. But today we're starting to look at how do we actually develop people in almost pod systems that would come together for a project, work on it, learn, adapt, build, and then the pod, once it gets up and running, the pod would go away and people would get reallocated. So you're going to see a much more flexible system. But to do this, it's going to really take a new mindset of business, okay? On how we look at people, resilience, agility, all those are going to become major factors going forward. I like this Walt Disney quote at the bottom. The first part's okay, but the end of it is, that new paths. I think that's the key. I'm going to talk about how do we find that curiosity to really kind of find new opportunities, okay, that are out there. So as you're thinking about how do I find new opportunities, I get this question asked a lot, okay? Hey, Len, how do we find new opportunities, new ideas? Well, many of you know, you go to you do the old ways, myself included. You go to the conferences, you look at, see what other companies are doing. You get the industry materials, you read those, and obviously you talk to your customers, okay? But what I'm telling you is you're going to have to not only do that, but if you want to see new ways of doing it, you're going to have to expand that circle of what you're looking at and who you're talking to. I can't wait till we can travel again. Some of the people mentioned that before we started today. Everybody's kind of dying to travel again. And travel is a great way to see new ideas when you see things in different states or different countries as well. I'll talk more about technology in a second here in a future slide. And I'm a big fan of going to different industry conferences as well and seeing what other industries are doing and how that can be brought back to your business. I'd highly encourage you. U of M we had the lady last week or 2 weeks ago, we had the founder of Acumen Fund. It's a social enterprise fund. She talked, it was a free talk at U of M. I believe it's now posted to on YouTube, but things that U of M offers, also other universities as well, what's going on out there, just to see, kind of make sure you're keeping a pulse on new ideas, new technologies that are being developed. I'm a big fan of the incubator systems, and I'm glad Anne's out there, Anne Parago's out there. So I get the Monday morning, I love the Monday Morning Enterprise Ireland. It's a free newsletter about what technologies and what companies the Irish government's investing in. It's very well done, and you get to see some new thinkings of how they're doing it and other companies and how they're building. And obviously, talk to potential customers. All the literature in business tells you to talk to your current customers. Well, yeah, you're doing that. But also, I think it's important to talk to folks that aren't your customers now. And what are they seeing, okay? And at the bottom here, I've got there's a little organization here in town called International Child Care. They support, they're 54 years old. They support a nonprofit in a children's hospital in Haiti. And they just did a new fundraiser, totally new ways of thinking. Because of COVID, they just signed up 67 new donors because they started thinking about, we need to get new customers, new donors, younger donors involved. And it was pretty amazing how they've adapted. Okay. So one of the things how do you get beyond some of your own experiences? Is key. This is something I think is not talked about. And Rob, we need to write a paper. So on this, I have a good friend, and she runs one of the top companies in Ireland. She started it 30 years ago. And she's an entrepreneur, very successful. And I talked her into taking a break. Her daughter was graduating from high school. We put a good management team in place. And I said, you should take 6 months off, take a break. And she did. She traveled with her daughter. Then her daughter started college. She came back to the business. She got healthy. She lost weight. She exercised. And more importantly, she had ideas. Okay, because she got out of that day-to-day routine a little bit. And she was fortunate she had the resources to do that. Not everybody does, I understand. I understand that, but it was nice. She's reinvigorated her business. She has 99% market share in Ireland, probably 30% in the UK now. And one of the ideas was to move into the UK, take her business into to Britain. And so again, it's having that kind of space to quiet your mind. I do a little exercise with my students. And a few of you, I know, work with students and teach. I make them do 5 minutes without looking at their phone. I put 15 minutes, but with the students, the 21, 22-year-olds, it's funny to watch how after about 5 minutes, they start to shake because they're they don't know how to quiet their.
Len, I want to ask you a question about this
because
I'm finding from my coaching clients now that they're afraid to take time off, and people have missed their vacations.
Yeah.
I've got a client at one of the big corporations that encourages people to take time off, and
good.
Afraid that if he goes away, and this is a high level, like a vice president level, that when he comes back, he's going to be out of a job or reassigned to something. So he's afraid to go away for more than a few days at a time. Are you seeing that?
Oh, we're seeing a lot, and not just in the companies in town, the university. People were afraid this summer, and I was encouraging some of the folks I work with, even to take a long weekend and disconnect, put the laptop in a drawer, and somewhat turn the phone off if you can too. Yeah, I think it's important to do that, Rob. We didn't do that this summer, and I think it's going to catch up with us this fall. I'm actually worried about that people hadn't taken vacations. I know that people were worried about money and stuff like that too because of job security, but just not even staycations where you stayed home and relaxed and unplugged. And I've seen it with some of the entrepreneurs that I worked with. It really does work when you can take breaks. Also, if you're going to come up with new ideas, it's about how do you quiet your mind. You can't do that when you're looking at your phone, your email constantly. The phone's ringing, or you got email blips or texts are coming in. And if you're going to build new things, new solutions, you got to find some quiet space. It's, for some of you, it might be walking, jogging, biking, yoga, okay? And then I actually have a place I have a barn that has a whiteboard in there, and I go down there and I design ideas that I have in my head, and it's a quiet space to work, okay? But you're going to have to find that, Rob. And I think we've gotten away from that this summer, and we've got to find ways to reconnect to that quietness to be able to see new ideas. Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. And then obviously one of the things is to connect to customers. Okay. So as you're thinking about the ideas that you're going to come up with, as you're thinking about reinvigorating your business or moving it in a little bit of a different direction in a different way or new ideas, make sure you understand the difference between want versus need, right? People want something, but do they really need it? You want the customers to need it, right? So make sure as you're talking to folks that this is something that they're not being, oh yeah, sounds good, but would they really take money out of their pocket and pay for it? And I'm also telling you to have multiple conversations, not only with your current customers, but seek new customers for interviews. Okay. I had a call last night with one of my exec MBA students, and we're doing a project with a small company in Detroit. And he said he was about to order last night online, and then he stopped. He got to the end, he put his credit card, but he didn't hit the go button to pay for it. So we kick off the class next week officially. And I'm curious to see what was that little piece that held him back, right, from doing that. So it'd be good data to share with the company. Okay, he went through the website, he found the product he liked, he did a lot of it, and then what held him back from making that final purchase. Okay, one of my fans, I don't think he's on this morning, so is Ari at Zingerman's. Okay, and if you guys ever go to the coffee shop in the morning down on State Street, and a lot of times you'll see Ari there with his laptop, and he's looking at the news or doing emails. And I apologize because I see this is recorded. So Ari, if you listen to this, I'm not stalking you, buddy. But it's funny. It's fun to watch him. He's always doing customer analysis and market research. He's got his head down for a while. He'll look up, and then he'll pay attention to, like, he'll look at. You can see he's looking at, did somebody order the small coffee, the large coffee? Did they get the scone with it? He's one of the best I've ever seen, and he's always got a really great pulse on his customers. And at night you'll see him at Rob mentioned the Roadhouse earlier. You'll see him bussing tables at the Roadhouse. And if you watch him, he's looking at your plate to see, did I give enough, was there enough potatoes on there, mashed potatoes? Did you not like the coleslaw? It's interesting to watch Rob. Him. And if he's at the cash register, and he's smiling because of course you give him a credit card. But he's also looking to see what you ordered. You can see his eyes scan down through the list to see, okay, did they pick more of the vegetarian dish today, or is it more of the chicken dish? He's one of the best, I think, at connecting with customers. I'm sure I'm going to get a phone call this weekend over this as well from Ari. But watch him. It's amazing to watch how he's always thinking about his customers. Okay? I have a friend in Ireland. My kids call her affectionately the cheese lady. She's amazing how she connects to her customers. She has the finest European cheeses. And one of the things that we started talking about, and I'll show you an example a little later with this, but we set up a home delivery system for her. That she was attached to a farmer's market in the morning. And so, everybody went down in the town, went to this market. But with COVID, the market got shut down. So she had to come up with new ways of thinking about her business, started talking to her customers. And her breakfast sandwich is one of the best you'll ever have. It's amazing. And she has good coffee. So they talked to her about, like, can you set up a little, during the week, have people be able to drive by and pick up a coffee and a sandwich. She had an indoor access to the market and an outdoor access to the street. And then we went old school. We put an answering machine. She's not a tech person. Some of you probably aren't, maybe not either. But she put just an answering machine where people could call and put orders in for her cheese, and she writes it down, and then she has a young man who delivers it at the end of the day. So again, how do you find ways, listening to your customer, talking to them, finding out what they want? You guys all know this, but you got to practice it.
If I want to make a shout out to another new enterprise in town, relatively new, which is Argus Farm Stop.
Oh yeah.
Two venues for that. One is on Packard, and the other's on Liberty downtown. And they talk about farmers market. They have brought farmers markets to their marketplace, and the farmer just brings in the food once a week, and they have a tech system, so it's marketed. They know which farmer is supplying which piece of beef or which pastry, and it's all automatically sent to that person, and they get like 80% of what they sell, and the farmer doesn't have to spend the day at the farmer's market, and we in the community can get fresh produce, fresh meat, all those things, and with the great service. So that's Kathy Sample and Bill Brinkerhoff who have set that up. And I would encourage everybody to go by there or to order online and pick it up in front of their store.
Hey, Rob, I was just at the Packard one a couple of days ago, down by Dewey and Packard area.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I show you a low-tech one, but there's a high-tech one, very similar to what Rob just was saying too, that a friend of mine was talking about, he's into technology and was saying, Len, how do we find out if something's really organic? So it started talking to folks and saying, okay, what would you like? Would you use a sample like this? So he's developing a sensor strip that you can then wipe it and it won't do anything to the fruit. And then you can put it on your seed. Does it have pesticides, or was it truly organic? I thought this was an interesting idea, but it came through, not through my friend, it came through talking to people saying, we'd like to have a solution here, okay? Again, it's just encouraging to talk to folks, okay? Not just your current, but other customers too, potential customers. So the second part is where to begin. So you start to think about, how do you find ideas? I get asked this a lot. It's like, okay, Len, where do we find ideas from, okay? To be able to do that, I think you have to step back a little bit in your business. And I'm going to talk about how to do an internal review and external review. And a lot of you know this, there's nothing new here, but I don't think it gets done too often. And I don't like to say weaknesses, I prefer challenges, okay? Because all businesses have them. And how do you sit down and say, okay, what does our business do well, or nonprofit organization? What is our strengths? And then what is our challenges? And how do you list those out? Okay. And I think it's important to understand that as a baseline. Okay. Now, if you want to get more sophisticated, you can do it as a matrix. Okay. And what this is, and if you're a nonprofit, you can change things on the vertical axis on the side there, okay, the y-axis. Instead of sales, you could put donors. You guys know this. And then you can do a scoring system going from 1 being low, 5 being doing it very well. And how do you start to score your business, okay? And the piece that I want to just leave you with is, it's not about where you're at today, okay? We do this a lot with projects and stuff when we do these map projects that Rob mentioned earlier with companies and nonprofits, and they get all except, what do you mean our customer system is a 2? Well, it's what it is, okay? And sometimes you could say maybe it's between a 2 and a 3. Instead of a score of 2, we'll call it a 2.5. But it's not about that. It's about, how do you go forward, okay? How do you move your organization to the next box, right? And what would that take? And how do you fill in these boxes? So you have definitions in these boxes. I'm giving you just a high overview this morning. And I can, if anybody wants, you can send me an email. I can send you, I have a whole document behind this. But how do you start to think about, okay, what's going to take if our sales are a 3, how do we move it to a 4, okay? And that's what's key, is how do we go forward? Not get stuck in arguing whether we should be a 2 or 3, okay? That's not the point. It's how do we move our organization in the right direction? And then, so I talked about internal. How do you start to think about external, okay? Just what's going on in the marketplace around you. Ask what's changing, okay? That's my second slide today. I was talking about, I have the person's head up there and seeing what's behind you. What is going on in the marketplace? Is your market growing? Okay, I'll talk about pests there in a minute in the next slide. But what's going on? Industry analysis. What is the dynamics? Who has power? Your customers, your suppliers, okay? And can that change? For years, Intel had power and Dell got upset. And Dell came up with a system that forced Intel, Dell got the power. Now Intel has it back, right? And Apple's trying to develop their own processors to take some of that power away. So how does the dynamics of an industry that are changing? Number 3 is your competitors. Obviously, I talked a little bit about that. 4 is what's changing with your customers. One of the reasons I love teaching undergrads still is that, they start teaching me things. Like in apparel now, I'm noticing the men and women in the undergrads in my class are all back to wearing big, bulky sweaters again, which I haven't seen in a while, or sweatshirts, the bulky sweatshirts. Probably haven't seen that since probably the late 80s, maybe. So you're seeing the trends change, right? And you're not only apparel, but technology and what they're playing with. Was there a question out there, Rob? Oh,
I-
okay, just the phone. And then lastly, you got to start thinking about technology and how it can change your business too. Okay. And I know not everybody's a tech person, but you need to start paying attention to this because you got to get the efficiencies, and technology can help you do that. Okay. Um, I have a former MBA student that is developing. It's kind of cool. He looked at the technology of getting into hearing aids, and he said, "Len, there's no room. There's too many competitors in there to do digital hearing aids." So he's developing an analog hearing aid, and he's got them where he can sell. He's going to sell them for $6 each. They can be taken apart, cleaned. Obviously, they're not perfect like the digital ones are, which costs probably several $1,000s. But he's taken the technology in a way old school, I called it, and saying, there's a world big marketplace. They can't afford a $2,000 hearing aid, but people can afford maybe a $6 or a $10 hearing aid. So again, it's all about learning is what I'm trying to encourage here on the marketplace. And so I talked about on the previous slide, the pest. That's the political, economic, social, demographic, and technology. What is changing in the marketplace, okay? And how do you have a good pulse on those changes, okay? Obviously, what's going to be, what's going to happen in the economy in 2021. I'm not going to the first one. We're skipping that bucket, okay? But the second one is the economics. Is the economy going to come back up in 2021, go down? Things that you need to pay attention to and how they can affect your business, right? I talked about technology earlier, and social demographic issues are always changing, okay? And then other ways to find, how do you observe trends, finding a problem, okay? Some of this is like, you're talking to your customers, they'll tell you, they'll bring ideas to you too. How do you find new ways? So we talk about reinvigorating your business with your current model, but is there things that you could add to your business model as well? And this is a good time when things are a little slower a little bit. I know it's tougher right now, but this is a good time to kind of think about, is there ways to grow my business in a different direction? And then how do you evaluate? So hopefully some of the stuff you did, the internal analysis, the external analysis, you started to pay attention, start making a list of some of the ideas you have. How do you analyze those ideas, okay? And I use a 5-step process, really simple, nothing rocket science here. Make sure there's a customer, it'll make money. These are questions. I don't worry about competitors. I'd like to know that there are competitors. A lot of times in business school, we talk about being first mover. I hate that. I'd rather be the second mover or the third mover, okay, in a space, because eventually you'll learn, they'll make mistakes, and you'll end up taking over the marketplace. So I like when there's competitors. When I teach it to the students, I say, look, don't worry about competition. Figure out how to do it better, okay? And then resources, what kind of investment you're going to need, people you're going to need. And lastly, do you have the team that can do it? Can they execute? So just using the cheese lady example. So we were looking at, I talked about earlier, like for her expansion of her little business, okay? And I just was trying to keep it simple today. So how do you look at her customers? So we started talking, and people said, yeah, if you had breakfast sandwiches during the week, we'd stop by. We still want cheese, her cheese business. So she knew she was going to expand. It was going to give her additional revenue. Competitors, basically, when they shut down the market, her competitors got stopped. So there was 2 or 3 other competitors, and she was going to be the only game in town, which is a good thing, right? So we knew she was going to pick up some more customers, and it was going to lead to more revenue, okay? Resources, she bought a $100 answering machine, and we found a couple of carts, and she just put a couple $100s into it. It wasn't expensive, didn't put a lot of cash out, small business, right? And to be able to pick up more business. And then I thought it was kind of cool. She hired her son to come in the morning and help make sandwiches and coffee before he started his day job at 9 o'clock. He could help her out for a couple hours and then walk over to his job was not too far away. And so she didn't have to hire a full-time person. Again, just using a screen to say, if you have these opportunities, how do you assess them? Okay. And for some of you that have more sophisticated businesses, obviously the business model, you can do it this way as well. Okay. How do you look at your strategy? How do you think about resources? What network you've got in place? And obviously talking to the customers. And then you can fill in the boxes below here, okay, of what you're trying to accomplish. And then lastly, agility and execution. I think this is a key piece as well. It's going to be more prominent in the future. Rob, we should do a class together on how to teach this stuff, because even at the business school, we teach a lot about planning on the front end of an idea, but I think this is going to become more key in the future of how do you execute. and teaching ways to execute. I think that's going to be, if you can do that, you're going to have pretty good job security too. I'm trying to incorporate that into my students right now. You got to do the front half, but you also have to do the second half of how to execute. And we don't talk enough about failure, I think, as well. Why do ideas fail, right? The window of opportunity is, what is the right timing, okay? Right now, I don't know if I'd want to start another app business. Probably 10, 15 years ago, it would have been great if you had a right idea. Today, unless it's really unique, the world is awash in apps, right? And how do you get people to even pay attention anymore to apps? Unless it's something that's really good and very unique, right? So it's that window, right? The timing, we call it. Not listening and adapting. One of the things that companies fail is that they get this idea, they talk to some customers, and they don't adapt. One of the things is, when you start to think about your ideas, I always say you're like standing on top of the big house in Michigan Stadium, and you've got this idea and you're looking at the field, but then you start to build the idea, and now you're in the good seats. But then eventually you launch it and you have to execute it. Now you're the quarterback on the field, and you got to call the plays, right? And you've got to have that agility to adapt. The customer says, well, it needs these kind of colors or these kind of features. And how can you have the systems in place to move, to tilt left or right as well? And I'm glad Megan's on here because she's one of the best at this. She's really good at adapting and listening to what her customers want and always figuring out ahead of them what their needs are as well. All of you know this, the top one, managing cash, and how critical that is, and having good systems in place to pay attention to your cash flow, not just the top line, but also the bottom line. And then lastly, smart growth. I have a friend that has a sushi restaurant. I don't know why I apologize. I'm on a food kick this morning. But he has one of the best sushi restaurants. And he was moving across the street, literally like 30 feet away. The two buildings looked at each other. And the newer building was a little nicer, a little bigger. But I thought he had smart growth. He shut down he had 3 days, what we call soft opening. And he had invited friends and family because the kitchen was a little different. And the lines for the wait staff was a little different. And he kind of worked out some of the operations before he opened the doors. I'm sorry?
Okay. Background noise.
Oh, okay, sure. And I thought that was really good. I thought that was really smart of him to do that. And he had been in business probably 15 years before, but making sure he understood and that had everything worked out so that his customers, when they came back, they were going to get the great service. And obviously the sushi, if you like sushi, it's really good. So part of this recovery plan is, I talked about this, you saw this earlier. How do you think about going forward, okay? COVID will end probably in another year or so, it's gonna end, right? And then how do you start using this time to not only plan, but to start to test some of your ideas and execute maybe on some of them and that's one of the things Rob was asking me about to talk to you guys too about. Don't give up on this. You got to keep moving forward. It's going to get better. And when it does, how do you get ready to just bust out of the gate, okay? And really try to drive your business or your organization forward, okay? And this is a nice tool to use to do some of that. And then my last slide here, and I'd love to take please any questions you have, again, about execution. You got to make sure you're paying attention still, because once you learn it, I think that's one of the things Paul and Ari always taught me. Once they figured out the menu at Zingerman's, it was time to rethink it, okay? And I think the same thing with your businesses. In this era of constant change, once you think you figured it out, you better start thinking about how to modify it and adapt it, okay? You're never going to have perfect information. There's still a lot of uncertainty. You can try to de-risk it as much as possible, but at some point you have to do it, right, and learn. And if you build the systems in place to make it agile and adaptive, you're going to be fine. And lastly, how do you anticipate those problems? Every business has them. That's why I had you do that strength and weakness, the challenges analysis earlier, okay? And making sure you're paying attention to, hey, what's on the horizon that actually could hurt my business, and what do I need to put in place? If it does happen, how do I move around it or just drive right over top of it, okay? So again, it's obviously about execution too, but it's also about smart execution is what I was trying to leave you with, okay? Hey, Rob, can I open up to questions?
Yes, please. Roger, you've got one. Roger Rail, you want to say what your question is?
I just sent it as a chat. Basically, Len, how have you adapted under COVID, for what you do?
Well, well, one of the things I did was it was kind of fun. I went to the NFL in the spring and said, look, we're not probably, they had ended up, we have these programs we do for the athletes. And a lot of them got canceled, obviously. And then I went to the NFL and said, look, let's tie this, let's do a webinar. Well, why don't we do a webinar and try to reach the customers differently, okay? And it was actually terrific. We had the first offering, we had 995 current and former players join. We had never done that before. Usually it was having folks come and sit in a classroom. And I think that was really kind of fun of how do we adapt to the systems. Now we're talking about how do we do more of this online, because the guys travel so much, they don't really want to travel. And so we need to make the education more flexible for them instead of having them. I mean, it's fun having them come to Ann Arbor and all that. But it's also, we've got to find ways to do it and that it meets their needs. So I think it's, and I think Megan was a big help years ago with my classroom, making sure that we put some of these systems in place early on, not knowing that COVID was going to hit, but, keep figuring out new ways to deliver content.
Any other questions we have out there from people? Len, I thought it might be interesting to take an example of a business and think about how to change it. I'm thinking about, like, how do you take an innovative business and make it even more innovative? And I'm going to put my friend Annie on the spot a little bit. Annie, are you there?
I am here. Hi.
Yeah, on the spot. So Annie runs and has run for what, 20 some years?
26 years, Keystone Media. We do online reputation management, website development. Yeah.
So maybe, Len, you could talk to Annie a little bit about how this might apply to a business that's already started 20 years ago as innovative, and she's trying to keep up with the trends. But how do you think about a business like hers, and what questions might you ask if you're consulting to somebody who's in that world?
Well, and I think it's also, Annie, and just like I said earlier, she probably knows this, it's also talking to your customers on what additional services they're willing to pay for, okay? And having those kind of discussions where you build a relationship with your customer more than it's just the transaction, but and I'm sure she's doing this, and she, and how does she then help them figure out what additional services? Annie, I wish I had known you a few months ago as I was looking at, I work with a nonprofit and looking at marketing programs, okay? And then for our website, what was the best programs to link in, to those, like, companies like Salsa Labs or Neon or Wonderkin, what is the best products and how do you help consult with those companies? We could have used some help, and we figured it out finally, but we could have definitely used some help. So how do you think about additional services that really come off of what your core business is?
Any comments on that, Annie? What have you been thinking about, how to keep yourself up to date?
Sure. So it's actually an interesting field because, my specialty is digital strategy and it changes daily. So it's almost job security. So like next year, Google is going to put extra emphasis on how fast is your website loading. So it's almost like built in future sales, where I go to my customers and I say, you have to update if you want to stay on top. This is what we need to do. So, but the gap analysis that Len's talking about is I recently put together a website for a small nonprofit, and I helped her do her analysis on what donation system she wanted to use. What does she look for? So my secret to my success is customer service. It's pretty hands-on. I'm always thinking about my customers and what would work for them in their unique situations.
I have a personal experience, Len, of having gone through this over the last month with Annie, and the questions she's asked me about what I want to put on my website and what I want to emphasize and how do I reach my customer, what are their pain points, has been really valuable. And then we got to the point yesterday of, okay, it's all set. Now, what are my Google AdWords? And I talked to a representative from Google who kept me on the phone for about an hour asking me questions. And I know they were selling me to put maximum amount of money onto my daily ads, but it really made me think about what my business was. And, I ended up saying, all right, I'll spend $44 a day on ads, up to $44 a day. But these are to turn me really good leads for my coaching business. So, it was a really interesting process to see how Annie went about this, how Google went about it, and made me really begin to reevaluate my business, both in terms of COVID, but also in terms of I've just moving away from teaching. I want to spend more time on coaching. How do I get the clients that I want? So it's quite a fascinating process.
It really is. And the other thing that's coming down the line that's going to impact almost every website out there is artificial intelligence. You had alluded to that, Len, earlier, is that's coming to search, or if it's not already there to a certain degree. Yeah, there's always changes, and you always need to make sure that you're looking forward with an eye on on what's coming behind you, for sure.
So Len, I'd like you to comment on what you're hopeful about. I hear a lot of people who are quite discouraged from everything. A lot of people are discouraged politically, feeling like things have not changed, or they've changed in ways that are really destructive. Working, you have 4 children yourself. You have a lot of contact with young adults in your world, also with executives. Tell me some of the things that you're hopeful about that you're seeing.
Well, I think that that with the younger folks, I have a pretty robust undergrad class right now, and it's nice to see they're looking at how do I develop ideas, and not everybody's an entrepreneur, and that's okay, and I don't teach it that way, but today what I'm trying to instill into them is that if you don't have ideas and you're not able to build those ideas, even small companies, medium-sized, large companies, you're not going to be employed. And how do you start to develop this mindset that if you can build ideas, you're always going to have a job, right? And so trying to instill those kind of that knowledge and capability in them before they leave Michigan, that they have some of this, and for the folks here today too, because it's also a lot of fun to try to tackle new ideas, and I think a lot of good companies get built in either downturns or pandemics like this. This is a good time to step back, think about what's possible, and go build it. There's funding out there, more so than ever, which is kind of nice today. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it's much more difficult. But today, there's so many great resources, not only in Ann Arbor, but the state of Michigan, also throughout the U.S. There's and federal funding as well for things. There's money out there to do things. What we're lacking is just imagination and some of that creativity, and then couple that with the ability to build. Okay? So that's, I think, what I'm hopeful is that people are going to see this as a chance to, move things forward, build ideas.
So this is an opportunity for some of you to ask Len questions about your specific situations, get some excellent quick consulting or an idea you might want to share, something you're trying to promote. So let me hear from some of the folks out there in my community of Leaders Connect. What are some of the things that are on your minds? Feel free to take the mic.
If I could jump in.
My name is Todd.
Yeah, my name's Todd Olson. I do business coaching. Excuse me. And, I'm coaching a lot of small businesses that, as I look at their businesses, at some point in time, they have the potential to be really disrupted by AI. However, for example, you use the example of the tires and autonomous vehicles. That could happen in 5 years. It could happen in 55 years. So it's hard to know how quickly these things are going to come and disrupt your businesses. How do you deal with and help businesses with these trends that are coming, but it's hard to know how quickly they should come? They could have a very nice business for the next 20 years, or they could have a very nice business for 2 years.
Hey, Todd, there's this author that I really like. His name is Ran Shriram, and he has a book came out, I think 2 years ago now, called Talent Wins. And in the book, I forget what page it is, I think it's page 36, it talks about that these big companies are only going to, in the future, only going to last 12 years. I didn't sleep well that night. But what he's saying is that, they can't move, they can't adapt, where your clients have that ability. As long as there's, I think, 2 things that they need to do is, and this, is really keeping a good pulse on their customers and listening. not only their current, but try to find new customers that would give them different points of view. And the second thing is to start develop like a little bit of a radar screen of what technology is being built, so that they're also seeing it. So when it starts to move in that direction, they'll know how to adapt. Now, smaller companies, as you know this, if they're providing amazing service, then their customers are probably going to stay with them no matter what the technology is, right? But if they can integrate some of that technology in with that great service, they're going to win. And I think in the future, small and medium-sized businesses are going to be in better shape than the big companies. I think the big companies are going to be really in trouble, like GE right now. I never thought in my lifetime that I'd see GE starting to go down, right? It was a behemoth. But right now they don't have anything that's really new, and they're really struggling. And it's not easy to turn that big battleship into a new direction, okay? Where I think that, when Jim Hackett was running Ford, he used to talk about getting lean, okay, and trim. And what he was talking about is getting a major company to be more nimble. And I think he's not in that position now, obviously, but I think that's the biggest thing. And I think these small companies, if they can maintain that nimbleness, they're going to win.
And I'd like to ask you about the environment. I know you've been working a lot in this area, and what are you hopeful there about? I mean, people are looking toward technology as the savior here. That maybe we don't have to make great changes in our life, but something will come along. What do you see happening in the energy and environmental situation?
Oh yeah, that's an area I track quite closely. And obviously everybody knows wind and solar, but I've been tracking it basically through it's all public information through the national labs that are out there, the Department of Energy, and there's a whole host of companies that are looking at completely different non-carbon solutions. Okay, and like Todd was saying earlier, it's probably could be 5 years out, 10 years out, could be, I don't think it's 50 years out, but it's coming at some point, and just paying attention to what's being developed. Okay, wind and solar are increasing, and I believe that they're going to continue. I'm not a big fan of the electric vehicle because I think some of the battery technologies pretty much hit a ceiling. It's going to get very small incremental improvements, but looking beyond that and really doing a lot of research into what the hydrogen fuel cells. I just did a project last year with a big German company, looking at them. They're starting to roll out some products that can also change how our cars operate or houses operate. And so really paying attention to hydrogen fuel cells, and then what's beyond that, right? So, and how does, these new energy systems that are coming, and then, I talked about the 76 nuclear companies out there that are doing some amazing work and trying to make nuclear safe, okay? And there's a program on, I think it's on National Geographic, and it was interesting with this young PhD. She didn't grow up with Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island, and so she didn't have any of those biases of how it didn't work in the past, and how they're developing new solutions that they think possibly could win. But all that's going to take 10 years minimum on the new energy side. There's none of those things are quick turnarounds. Those are things, deep investments that are going to take a while. But energy is one of the areas I personally track. And if you have interest, if somebody wants to grab coffee sometime, I'd be willing to do that too, because I know too much about new energy.
Well, that's one thing I know about energy is coffee. That is the
yeah. Cheers, Rob.
Yeah. Without coffee, I think there would be no creativity left in the world.
Yeah.
Forget liquor; it's all about coffee.
Len,
Sure.
Bill.
Hey, Bill.
You mentioned that right now we are inundated and saturated with too many apps. And what alternatives does a not-for-profit have to get their message out for people to be able to interact with what we're trying to help them achieve, if not an app?
Well, I think what you're talking about, and Bill shared some of this before with me, folks, so I have an idea what he's talking here. And I think what the idea that you guys have is a very good one. But it also, I think people build apps and then they put it in the marketplace and then they hope people will come, okay? So Bill, how do you work with somebody like Annie who can give you a better digital marketing solution? Just, the app is one face of it, right? But then how do you drive people towards that app, okay? And I see a lot of nonprofits and for-profits that they build it, but then they don't do the rest of it. And how do you put the marketing? Earlier, I showed you the slide about the mortgage company, you know, and you saw I said, look, with a few programmers, but then I also put underneath it a social media budget. So if you can match that app with a social media budget and get the word out, and you have to do it, you know, obviously very inexpensively. You don't want to spend a whole lot of money. You don't have a whole lot of money as a nonprofit to spend on that, but you have to. How do you get it known and make it known, right? And how do you work with some folks that can help you? And Bill, I actually turned to my students, some of my former students who, you know, the 20-somethings, it's part of their DNA at this age. So I have some folks, and Annie's worked with them, I'm sure too, that help me understand how do you connect, especially with that generation and what the tools are. I just learned how to use Hootsuite, and I learned how to use Hootsuite recently. Okay, where you can post something and you can go to all the different media instead of having to post everything, right, to each site.
And you can schedule it.
Yes. Yes.
Well, that sounds like a Halloween costume to me. I have no idea what that is. But Annie, may we get together at some point? Provide me with contact information, please.
Yes, I will. I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Len.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill.
And I'd like to call on Bill Beardsley. Is Bill still there? Bill, are you still out there? He might have left. I guess.
Hey,
I'm
Rob,
here.
it's Steve D, and I have a question. Oh,
Okay, Steve, go ahead.
Please, Steve.
Steve's
Len, really insightful talk so far. I wanted to get your insights on this. So I run a leadership development and organizational development consulting business. And, you know, we've been saying for 20 years, and I've been hearing people say, you know, learning is going to go all online. Like you'll just have online portals, you know, you won't need, you know, individual leadership coaching, get in a room, workshops. Well, you know, so as we do strategic planning, we've been saying for years, you know, how do we change with where we think technology is going? And what I found is that didn't happen. You know, we've been saying it for decades and people still need the personal one-on-one interaction coaching to make that happen. Well, you know, COVID happens, and, you know, now blended and virtual learning organizations, I think we've had a tipping point now where I don't think we'll go back fully to a classroom. We can run global leadership development programs over Zoom like this, where, you know, I could have told clients before, I'll give you a free, you know, program versus a paid program, and they would have still paid for the paid program where you fly everybody in because they felt like that, you know, that was the model that they needed. You know, and then you have organizations that are aggregators in this space that are doing things like Better Up Coaching, where it's kind of the Uber of coaching. So you swipe left and you can find a coach. And, you know, so we're looking at these different disruptors in the marketplace. How do you know, here's my question, and kind of teeing that up. How do you know when something is real that you need to pay attention to? And when do you look at something as it's only going to be a small slice of the market share, and you really, you know, stick to what you know to be true and don't worry about it?
Hey, Steve, look at Ann Perigo just dropped off, darn. I had a former student that he's got a company in New York called Bonsai, okay, just like the plant. And he's trying to do this blended coaching model with mentoring and some face-to-face, some online, additional resources. I think, and he's really smart. And he's adaptive kind of guy. He's one of the best students. In fact, he had a key to my office for a couple of years at the business school. He lived in my office. You just knew he was going to be successful. And I think he's got this new idea. Now it's going to have some challenges, and he and I have had some pretty blunt conversations about that. But I like what he's trying to do with this company called Bonsai, Steve. If you want, his name is Jake. I can connect you to Jake Rosenfeld pretty easily.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I'll shoot.
Yeah, my email is just lenm@umish. Okay, it's LENM@umish. And Ann Perigo, she just dropped off. She knows him too. He was one of those that we just smiled and said we knew he's gonna do more than just Bonsai. He's not done. But I think there's this integrated model that somebody also, I think Roger also said, that face-to-face isn't going away, and he's right. But can we use some of the tools to better connect folks? Okay.
Len, I wanted to talk about the importance of stick-with-itness as well as flying after innovation. As I look at the group here, I see different people who have stayed with their businesses and stayed with the model. Megan's an example, Bill Beardsley, people who have been innovative in the past, but it's taken a while for their programs to come to fruition. They saw the future, but then they had to stick with something that maybe wasn't successful immediately, but they had to believe in their vision of the future to stay with it. And I wonder if some of you, Carl's another one, Carl Sly, who was doing window covering, but saw the importance of electric, and now his design, all these kinds of things. So could some of you who have been innovators, but then have had to do that kind of stick with itness through the changes, be willing to comment on that? Megan, how about you? You've been in it for what, over 10 years now, 15 years? And
Oh yeah, yeah. Stop counting.
Your time has come yet? You know?
Have we figured this out yet? You know, I was just posting in the chat too. I mean, I think this is a nice follow-on, Rob, thanks, from Steve's question, right? I mean, we've done a lot of small experiments, some big and expensive experiments over the years. And one of the, you know, and so if I knew what was going to stick in advance, I probably wouldn't be here talking to all of you guys. Like, you know, I'd have this big fancy house somewhere, fabulous, right? But the, you know, we've made a bunch of small experiments over time, and where you can continue a small experiment or a big one, and it doesn't keep costing you money, but you can keep it out there. We built a course library off the shelf. It cost us just into 6 figures to build. It was a big experiment. And it didn't perform very well at all. And it was just hanging out and hanging out and hanging out. COVID hit, we said, hey, actually, we can build on this with this model. We released more of it, but super timely topics. So we built a race and equity in the workplace, you know, built on an existing program. We built, you know, basic COVID. We then take precautions in March. We then built a come back to work in May, and those have lifted all the rest of the curriculum, right? So the rest of the curriculum's now getting more traction. At the same time, we're taking those and we're putting them in those off the shelf pieces. We're putting them into nuggets of other things that are custom for a particular organization. We can do rapid development because we've got those things. That was honestly a project we'd pretty much left for dead, but it didn't cost me anything to keep it out and selling it.
Reminds me of, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, so anyways, and a couple of other things where, you know, we took face-to-face programs that used to be wildly popular. We fed people fabulous food. We had the Hands-On Museum come in and do activities with people, blah, 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 blah. And everybody loved them. And now that they're fully online, the price point is a little bit lower, but I don't have to travel. So it's less wear and tear on me. It's less wear and tear on my team because they don't have to do anything, right? I just show up with my headphones and rock and roll. And we're now getting people that couldn't otherwise attend our programs because they couldn't travel. Same content, just a different format. And then we're baking some of that up and making that asynchronous so that then that frees me up and makes things more nimble. So it's just a lot of small experiments, and some of them won't work.
Len, comments?
No, Megan's one of the ones I learned from, especially in my classroom. I've known her for a while, and yeah, she's really good, and she has that kind of adaptive spirit that you need, and that's going to continue. And Megan knows if you figure it out, it's time to change, right? So it's kind of, she was reiterating the words I was saying earlier today.
I think about, Len, that we sort of provided what you now are calling blended consulting to Megan years ago, where you and I came in together with very different skill sets, but helped Megan develop a business plan that and execution that would work. Bill Beardsley is another innovator out there. Bill, can you describe, you know, what you came up with? Well, again, maybe 20 years ago, it was an innovation at the time, and how you've had to shift again.
You know, Dr. Rob, I think you give me probably too much credit. This concept isn't that unique in the world, but for those that are not familiar with it, 16 years ago, a group of credit unions wanting to get into commercial lending decided to partner up together to form a company that could do that work for them. And I was fortunate enough to be recruited to start that company. And 16 years later, we're in Ann Arbor. We're 45 people, and we're managing about $1 billion of commercial loans. Probably the only, in today's world, pivot that we did early on was the concept was cost sharing. Whereas if you were a singular financial institution and you'd have to go out and buy the technology and hire all the people to do this commercial lending, if you teamed up with 3 or 4 or 5 other similar institutions, you'd have theoretically, a third or a fourth or a fifth of the overall costs that you would have, and maybe you'd have better talent, et cetera. So probably less than a year in, I think the credit unions realize that it's really not just about cost sharing, because you have to have drivers of business. So it's not just about the cost side, it's about creating the revenue as well. So what started out as predominantly a backroom operations effort really became more of a revenue creator and driver effort, because our company hired the lenders to go out looking for the borrowers. And as a result, we created more value for our owners, because it wasn't just viewed as this cost-related commodity service. It was actually a revenue generation service. And that made more credit unions want to join the effort. So now instead of, the original 5, we service dozens of credit unions around the state of Michigan. And it's a classic, I think, situation. You've got to choose where your value comes from. Does it come from lower cost? Does it come from value or revenue generation? Or is it both? In our case, it's about 75-25.
Comments, Len?
No, I think I like how he's moving his model, okay, and he's figuring out how that adaptiveness that we talked about. Hey, Rob, you asked me something earlier today too that, and I apologize for the shameless little plug, but at the business school, we have undergrad, grad, and exec MBA project courses. So for some of you who are looking for, to have things solved, there's an application process, and right now there's no fees or anything because we're not traveling. But there's ways to get some help if you've got a new business idea and you want a team of 4 to 6 students to help you kind of develop it. You own the IP and all that, but it's a really good program that we have, and it helps us teach the students how to really get close to practice, right? So we call it a collaboration between companies like yourselves and our students to both sides to learn.
Len, can you post on the chat here contact name for that?
They can just contact me, and then I'll point them to the right folks.
And we're going to post the video of this talk soon, hopefully by next week, and we'll also post the chat because there's a lot of really good questions on here, and I think tremendous information. I'm struck, Len, by listening to people, how the humility is like, oh, I didn't come up with that big of an idea. You're overdoing it. But sometimes it's not a breakthrough, like, oh my God, this is an amazing idea. I mean, like, what was Facebook? They thought about it. It was a dating app or something like that. So it's not the great ideas, but it's sticking. It's the stick with itness, the ability to shift when needed, but to not shift when not needed. I think that's also as important, because I see a lot of people that are on to great things, and then they decide, well, I need to go, follow the new shiny object, and they lose the track of what they really started. So it's a combination of that persistence and innovation, and believing in yourself and believing in what you've come up with.
And if anybody wants to send me a note, I just posted my email address. I'll send you the slides too if you want to take a look at them.
All right. I just want to, it's time to wrap up. I know we've had a very robust conversation, and I appreciate everybody who's participated. Anybody want to sign on and just say, contact me for this or that, put your name up on the chat. I'm looking for new executive coaching clients all the time, and I'm also forming groups of entrepreneurs that want to work with each other. One of the powers, I think, is to work with people on an ongoing basis, like in a peer support group. And I have several of those going. So if you'd be interested in joining one of those monthly groups, please let me know. Len, any encouraging last words here that you want to leave people with?
Yes, get outside today. It's beautiful. Okay, go take a walk, get on your bike, try to enjoy this weekend. This is probably, we're going to see the colder weather, as we know, we're all Michiganders. It's going to change, right?
Okay.
Get outside.
All right. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.